Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start this debate off, I would like to thank my opponent for coming out tonight. I would also like you, the judge, to thank you, the judge, for spending some of your quality time judging this event. It really helps us all, and it's a great learning experience for everyone involved. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the case. So the resolution is that sanctions against Iran are dangerous. So observation 1 is going to be resolution analysis. This is going to be a value round. Now, observation 2 is going to be our framework. Our value for this is going to be net benefits. Observation 3, contentions. Contention 1, sanctions would lead to economic disaster. Subpoint 1, according to the marketmogul.com, sanctions on Iran would lead to higher oil prices, saying Iran, quote, Iran would merely need to undertake some tactical naval maneuvering to increase tensions in the area and thereby increase oil prices, which could, if calculated improperly, lead to an even more drastic and potentially tragic escalation of U.S. and Iran tensions, end quote. So what that means is that if we impose sanctions on Iran, all they're going to do is they're going to maneuver their navy to the point where it impedes the flow of oil to us, which means that the oil prices would go up, which would cause economic hardship, which obviously is what President Trump is trying to avoid. Subpoint 2, the internal link is going to be that higher oil prices would lead to higher costs for the American people. It's all well and good to put sanctions on Iran, and it's a very good choice. However, or it's a feasible choice, I should say. It's a debatable choice. However, in the long run, it would cost Americans money to impose sanctions. Now, America has always been kind of like the big brother of the world, and it has hurt America. And by imposing sanctions against Iran and them, for example, maneuvering their navy to kind of hinder the flow of oil, we're actually hurting ourselves more than we're hurting them. And that's the impact, that sanctioning Iran puts the U.S. into economic disaster. What that means is we sanction Iran moves their navy, the price of oil goes up, which puts us into an economic epidemic where we have to pay more for oil because we're enforcing good. Contention 2 is going to be terrorism. Subpoint 1, there are a number of terrorist organizations who would not sit quietly during the sanctions and carry out attacks on American citizens and military personnel. What that means is that there are many, many terrorist organizations that attack not only U.S. citizens, but also Iran and all other sorts of different places in the Middle East. And they're not going to sit back and once we say, you know what, we're going to put sanctions on Iran and they're not going to be able to do this, this, and this because we have sanctions on them. They're not going to take that. They're going to carry out terrorist attacks against the United States. Subpoint 2, these terrorist organizations would launch attacks against U.S. citizens and members, leading to loss of life. What that means is that by opposing sanctions, we actually are kind of opening ourselves up to the fact that terrorists will take advantage of this, which would lead to loss of American life. And the impact that it's going to be, subpoint 3, the impact of contention 2 terrorism is that the frequency of terrorism attacks against not only U.S. citizens, but other citizens of the nation or of the world is going to be increased, which means that by imposing sanctions against Iran, we are actually not only putting America into economic disaster, or in place for economic disaster. We are also, by kind of indirect motions, also increasing the frequency of terrorism, which we have been fighting against since 2001. So the voting issues today is that the fact that sanctions do not have the most amount of benefits. By imposing sanctions, we are actually hurting ourselves, but not only economically, but also in the value of life of American citizens. By imposing sanctions on Iran, we are including the fact that they can move their naval into a place that would lead to us having economic hardship, as well as the fact that the frequency of terrorism will increase, therefore costing the lives of Americans. So what that means is that overall, when you look at the value, which is net benefits, the value for this entire round is net benefits. And your job as a judge is to look back on both the AF and the neg and decide who has more benefits that affect the overall resolution. Now, if you're looking at mine, you see that imposing sanctions would be all well and nice for world peace and yada, 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 and all that nice grass is green on the other side kind of stuff, but you're also By imposing sanctions, by being the world police, you are affecting American citizens with not only economic hardship from the raising cost of oil, but you're also opening the door for increased terrorism that not only affect active duty service members, but also U.S. citizens and many of our allies who would be affected by the frequency or the increase of the frequency of terrorism attacks. So with all this, I urge a strong affirmation ballot. Thank you.